to meet the demands of the 80s, the all-new Dodge ARIES and Plymouth Reliant. These front-wheel drive models feature some of the most advanced engineering and serviceability features found in any compact. Engineering that keeps you, the technician, in mind. You'll find an all-new instrument panel designed with up-front serviceability. Most items can be serviced by removing the screws and unclipping the bezel and mask. Now, the voltage limiter is easily removed. To service the speedometer, disconnect the cable at the speed control servo or transaxle. Remove the 2 screws, and you can pull the speedometer out to disconnect it faster and easier. Take out 1 more screw, and the fuel gauge can be removed. To service the entire cluster, first disconnect the rear speaker amplifier button on cars so equipped. Then remove the upper right bezel. Take out the rearward panel top mounting screws. Next, detach the upper cluster housing from the base panel. Unscrew the lower housing and slide the cluster rearward to disconnect the wiring harnesses. You can now service the printed circuit board. Each circuit includes a fusible link that will blow when overloaded to protect the gauges. You'll find a new self-adjusting stop lamp switch. To replace it, simply pull the old switch out, depress the brake pedal, and slide the new switch onto the clip. As the brake pedal is released, the self-adjusting mechanism will seat the switch in. The clutch pedal's speed control switch is a feature found on ARIES and RELIANT models with automatic speed control and manual transaxle. Just like the brake pedal speed control switch, it's designed to disengage the speed control whenever the clutch is depressed. No adjustment is needed. If the speed control won't disengage when the clutch is depressed, check the switch and replace it if necessary. The ARIES and RELIANT wagons also feature a rear window washer and wiper. You'll find the washer reservoir fill hole next to the right tail lamp. An innovative fluidic nozzle sprays fluid in a fan-like pattern. There's no adjustment needed. If the nozzle fails to work properly, check it and replace it if necessary. The standard engine on the ARIES and RELIANT is the all-new Chrysler 2.2-liter Trans 4, designed specifically for front-wheel drive cars. You'll like the easy topside serviceability of the air pump, distributor, oil filter, spark plugs, and AC compressor. Adjustment of the timing belt tension is basically the same as on the familiar 1.7-liter engine. However, if you're replacing the belt, be sure that the 2 arrows on the camshaft sprocket are in line with the cylinder head joint lines and that the small hole is straight up. Also be sure that the alignment marks on the crankshaft and intermediate sprockets are directly in line with each other before you install the belt and adjust its tension. And here's something new on the 2.2 that you won't find on most other 4s: hydraulic valve adjusters. These devices keep the rocker arms seated properly against the camshaft and eliminate the need for any valve lash adjustment. Depending on whether an automatic or manual transaxle is used, the 2.2 will feature one of 2 different engine temperature sensors. The single terminal sensor is used with the manual transaxle, and a dual terminal thermistor is used with the automatic. Both sensors monitor engine coolant temperature as part of the oxygen feedback system. The drive belts on the 2.2 engine are easy to replace or adjust. Begin the replacement procedure by removing the AC compressor belt. Loosen the idler bracket pivot bolt and the locking bolt, and the belt can be pulled out. Now remove the alternator belt by loosening both the pivot nut and locking bolt. Loosen the adjusting screw and remove the belt. Once the AC compressor and alternator belts are off, you can remove the power steering pump belt. First, loosen the pivot bolt and nut. Then, lower the car, loosen the locking bolt, and remove the belt. To install the belt, insert a 1/2-inch drive torque wrench into the pump adjusting bracket. Torque it to 75 foot-pounds. Then tighten the locking bolt to 30 foot-pounds and both the pivot bolt and pivot nut to 40 foot-pounds. Fit the alternator belt onto the crank and alternator pulleys before slipping it onto the water pump pulley. With the gauge method, measure belt tension. Turn the adjusting screw until belt tension is at 120 pounds. Then tighten the locking bolt and pivot nut to 30 foot-pounds. Fit the AC compressor belt onto the crankshaft and compressor pulleys. Then slip it around the idler pulley. Apply 40 foot-pounds of torque to the weld nut on the idler bracket. Then tighten the locking bolt and pivot bolt to 40 foot-pounds. To remove the air pump belt, first take off the pulley cover. Now remove the locking bolt and pivot bolt and lift the air pump out of the way. Begin reinstallation by fitting the belt onto the pulley. Then reposition the air pump and install the pivot bolt and the locking bolt finger tight. Apply 50 foot-pounds of torque to the adjusting bracket. Then tighten the locking bolt and pivot bolt to 25 foot-pounds. Finally, reinstall the pulley cover. The ARIES and RELIANT also feature an optional 2.6-liter four-cylinder engine built by Mitsubishi Motors. This is the same basic engine found in Challenger and Sapporo models, but with a different belt arrangement to accommodate transverse mounting. The AC compressor and alternator run off the same belts. To remove the belts, loosen the locking bolt, pivot nut, and the jam nut on the alternator adjusting screw. Now lower the alternator and remove the belts. To remove the power steering pump belt, first take off the magnetic timing probe receptacle. Loosen the pivot bolt, locking bolt, and remove the belt. Begin belt installation by inserting a 1/2-inch drive torque wrench into the mounting bracket and torquing to 110 foot-pounds. Tighten the locking bolt and pivot bolt to 40 foot-pounds. Now reinstall the magnetic timing probe receptacle. Install the compressor alternator belts around the crank pulley, alternator pulley, and AC compressor pulley. Using the gauge method, measure the belt tension. Turn the adjusting screw until belt tension is at 120 pounds. Then tighten the locking bolt, pivot nut, and jam nut to 20 foot-pounds. You'll find the water pump on the opposite side of the engine. To remove the belt, first take off the pulley cover. Loosen the pivot bolts and locking bolt. Now remove the belt. To adjust the belt after installation, first apply 10 pounds of force midway between the pulleys. The belt tension should allow a deflection of about 8 millimeters from its original position. Retighten the locking bolt and the pivot bolts to 204 inch-pounds. Last, reinstall the pulley cover and tighten the screws to 105 inch-pounds. Unlike the 2.2, the AC compressor on the 2.6 is located near the bottom of the engine. To remove the compressor, first disconnect the negative battery cable. Then remove the air duct. Now discharge the AC system. Remove the distributor cap and place it aside. Also remove the dipstick tube. Some cars are equipped with shims between the alternator and bracket. If you find them, mark their position before unbolting the alternator from its bracket. Leave the wiring attached and move the alternator aside. You can now disconnect the discharge and suction lines. Raise the car and take off the splash shield. Take out the mounting bolts and remove the compressor. To reinstall the compressor, first bolt it into position. Put the splash shield back on and lower the car. Using new steel gaskets, reinstall the suction and discharge lines, reposition the alternator shims, if so equipped, and bolt the alternator back into position. Next, reinstall the dipstick tube, distributor cap, and drive belts. Adjust them to the proper specs. Reconnect the air duct. Finally, recharge the AC system and reconnect the negative battery cable. The ARIES and RELIANT feature a new 4-speed manual transaxle, the A460. Servicing is very similar to the A412, but there are a few differences you should know about. The fill plug on the A460 is located in the end cover. When adding or replacing fluid, use ATF. To adjust the shift linkage, first be sure the selector lever is in neutral between first and second gear. Lock it into position by inverting this pin and threading it into the shift housing cover. Now raise the car and loosen the clamp on the gear shift tube. Position the slider against the blocker bracket and align the tab on the slider with the hole in the bracket. Retighten the clamp. And finally, remove the alignment pin and replace it in the top cover. Another new feature you'll find on the ARIES and RELIANT is a self-adjusting clutch linkage. No pedal free play or periodic service adjustment is needed. There are also two new automatic transaxles on the ARIES and RELIANT models, the A413 and A470. Again, servicing is almost identical to the A404. The one exception is the procedure for reverse band adjustment. It's the same for both the A413 and A470. First, remove the pan and valve body. Next, back off the lock nut about 5 turns. Using the special tool, tighten the adjusting screw to 41 inch-pounds. Then back it off 3.5 turns. Retighten the lock nut to 20 foot-pounds. Finally, reinstall the valve body and pan and refill the transaxle. If you have to service the drive shafts on either the manual or automatic transaxle, be aware that one of 2 different makes is used. These shafts must not be mixed on the same vehicle. The Citroen drive shaft has 4 convolutions on the boot and an angled joint housing, while the GKN shaft has only 3 convolutions on the boot and a radius joint housing. Brake system diagnosis on the ARIES and RELIANT is the same as on Omni and Horizon. In fact, rear brakes are identical to those used on the smaller front-wheel drive cars. However, the front disc brakes on ARIES and RELIANT have vented rotors. Also new are stainless steel caliper pins and Teflon sleeves in the caliper bushings to eliminate the need for lubrication. You'll find that brake pedal travel is a bit shorter than on Omni and Horizon, and the parking brake is foot-operated instead of by hand. You'll find the front suspension on these new front-wheel drive models very similar to the Omni and Horizon. But there are some new features on the steering gear coupling. There's a new dash seal to protect the coupling from the elements, and the coupling is held together with a spring clip instead of a roll pin. You'll also find a new service feature which allows you to check ball joint wear without a gauge. The car must remain on the floor for this procedure. Simply try to wiggle the grease fitting. A good ball joint should show no movement. If it moves easily, the ball joint is worn and should be replaced. There's also a brand new rear suspension on the ARIES and RELIANT. It features a trailing arm, inverted U-section axle, and integral sway bar assembly, large coil springs at each wheel, and a track bar to help control lateral sway. Though there's no periodic maintenance on the rear suspension, you'll find serviceable items like shocks much more accessible. Incidentally, if you have to replace a trailing arm pivot bushing, be sure to use the special tools for proper removal and installation. The Dodge ARIES and Plymouth Reliant. From concept to production to dealer. The cars engineered for the 80s. With economy, serviceability, and customer satisfaction in mind.
A couple of months ago, the MTSC portion of this tape discussed with you the bench repair of the C171 compressor. But an AC system can only function as good as the compressor that pumps the refrigerant. And to pump the refrigerant, the compressor depends on a properly functioning clutch and proper belt tension. If the AC compressor is functioning properly, the system has the proper charge of refrigerant, and all other components are operating to specification, proper AC performance is expected. The AC compressor clutch is probably the most overlooked part of any automotive AC system. Let's go over the C171 compressor's clutch, starting from the installation of the field coil. The field coil fits on the compressor over the neck of the front cover and is aligned to the compressor by an alignment pin. For 4-cylinder equipped vehicles, a special alignment pin has been developed and is covered in Technical Service Bulletin number 2404A80. The field coil is retained to the front cover by a special snap ring, 78 thousandths of an inch thick, with a bevel on the inside edge. This beveled edge faces away from the compressor when installed. Once the snap ring is installed, use a blade-type screwdriver and make certain the snap ring is fully seated in the retaining groove, and connect the ground wire to the compressor. Next, the pulley assembly is installed and the pulley retaining snap ring. This snap ring is the same design as used on the field coil. Make certain the beveled edge is properly seated in the groove using a blade screwdriver to seat it. The last component is the plate assembly. Before installing the plate, place a stack of shims 100 thousandths thick on the compressor crankshaft and then tighten the plate assembly with the retaining nut and washer. Here is where the critical part of the whole installation is. There should be a 20 thousandths inch to 35 thousandths inch air gap between the friction face of the pulley and the plate assemblies. To make certain the air gap is correct, measure the gap in at least 3 places. Remember, the gap should be no more than 35 thousandths of an inch and no less than 20 thousandths of an inch. Remove the plate assembly and the required number of shims to achieve the proper air gap, and torque to 155 inch-pounds. In heavy-duty applications or in high ambient temperature areas, an added benefit to proper clutch engagement and operation can be the burnishing of the 2 friction surfaces. With the engine operating at curb idle speed, using a jumper wire from the positive terminal of the battery, engage and disengage the compressor clutch at least 10 times. This will allow the 2 friction surfaces to seat and help eliminate slip. Recheck the air gap just to be certain and check the belt tension. New belt tension is 120 pounds. Used belt tension is 70 pounds. One last tip before we close this session. If the vehicle has experienced a clutch problem previously, check the available voltage to the field coil. Applied clutch field coil voltage should be 11.5 volts. If it is low, clutch slippage may occur. Check the electrical system and look for loose or corroded connections. Thank you for your participation in this MTSC session. We'll look forward to being with you during the next tape.